The hip-hop world is watching closely because Rick Ross may have just opened the door to one of the biggest rap conversations of the year. After years of silence, the boss is finally returning with a brand new album, and now fans are asking one major question. Is Rick Ross coming back with music, or is he coming back with a message? During a recent conversation, Ross hinted that his upcoming project could include records aimed at certain people in the industry. He suggested that some names might be mentioned, and the moment those words left his mouth, the internet started searching for answers. Who is he talking about? Who could be the target? And are two of hip-hop's biggest names about to find themselves in the middle of another lyrical war? Immediately, fans started connecting the dots to two names that have been linked to Rick Ross for years: Drake and 50 Cent. Both relationships have a complicated history filled with collaborations, competition, interviews, and moments that created some of the biggest discussions in hip-hop culture. For Drake, the story is complicated. There was a time when Ross and Drake created major records together and appeared to have one of the strongest artist relationships in the game. But over time, things changed, and now every comment, every lyric, and every interview gets analyzed by fans looking for hidden messages. Then there is 50 Cent, a rivalry that has survived for more than a decade. Their back and forth became one of the most talked about conflicts in rap history, with both artists taking shots through music, interviews, and social media. Even years later, fans still wonder if the next chapter of their story could be written on a new album. Now Rick Ross is preparing to release a project after a long break, and the pressure is higher than ever. This is not just another album release. This is a moment where a veteran artist has the chance to remind everyone why his name still carries weight. But the biggest mystery remains unanswered. If Rick Ross really decided to address his rivals, who will be the first person mentioned? And when the music finally drops, will fans hear a legendary comeback? Or the beginning of another unforgettable hip-hop battle? Rick Ross has built a career around confidence, luxury, and the image of a true heavyweight in hip-hop. From the moment he entered the music scene, he created a larger-than-life persona that separated him from many artists of his generation. His deep voice, cinematic storytelling, and ability to create an atmosphere through his music helped him become one of the most recognizable figures in modern rap. Now, after years of experience in the industry, Rick Ross is preparing for another major chapter with his upcoming album. For fans who have followed his journey, this release represents more than just another collection of songs. It represents a chance for Ross to remind the world why he has remained relevant for nearly 2 decades while many artists from his era have disappeared from the spotlight. The timing of this album makes the moment even more interesting. Rick Ross is not returning as a new artist trying to prove himself. He is returning as an established name with a long history of success, major collaborations, business ventures, and a reputation for speaking with confidence. Because of that, every move he makes is analyzed closely, and every statement creates headlines. The anticipation around the album increased even more when Ross suggested that listeners could expect competitive energy on the project. During an interview, he hinted that there could be songs aimed at certain people and that some names might be mentioned. Those comments immediately created speculation throughout the hip-hop community. Fans know that rap has always been built around competition. Artists have traditionally used their music to respond to criticism, address rivals, and tell their side of the story. Some of the most memorable moments in hip-hop history came from artists pushing each other creatively through lyrics. Because of that tradition, any hint of possible diss tracks creates instant excitement. And when people started discussing who Rick Ross could possibly be addressing, 2 names quickly became part of the conversation: Drake and 50 Cent. The connection between Rick Ross and Drake goes back many years. At one point, the two artists had a strong professional relationship. They collaborated on successful records and appeared together as part of a powerful era in hip-hop. Their chemistry was recognized by fans, and many viewed them as 2 artists who helped shape the sound of their generation. However, relationships in the music industry can change over time. As both artists continued to grow, build their brands, and follow different paths, the dynamic between them became more complicated. Public comments, interviews, and fan theories created questions about whether there was tension behind the scenes. The situation became even more interesting when listeners began analyzing Drake's own music and interviews for possible references toward Ross. In hip-hop culture, fans often look deeper into lyrics, searching for hidden meanings and possible messages. A single line can create weeks of discussion, especially when it involves two major artists with a history together. Then there's the story of Rick Ross and 50 Cent, one of the most recognizable rivalries in modern rap history. Their conflict became one of hip-hop's most talked about battles. It was not just about music, it became a competition of personalities, confidence, and public image. Both artists had strong opinions, and neither side appeared willing to back down. The rivalry produced years of conversations, diss records, interviews, and online moments that fans still remember today. 50 Cent famously attacked Ross through music and public comments, while Ross responded with his own confidence and continued building his career. What made the rivalry so interesting was that both artists developed successful careers beyond just music. Rick Ross expanded his brand through business opportunities, while 50 Cent became a major figure in television, entertainment, and entrepreneurship. Even as their careers evolved, the history between them continued to attract attention. That is why every time Rick Ross prepares to release new music, fans naturally wonder whether he will revisit old conflicts or simply focus on his own legacy. A new album gives artists a platform to tell their story, and for someone like Ross, who has experienced both criticism and success, there are plenty of topics he could explore. The upcoming project arrives at a unique point in his career. He has already achieved many of the goals that younger artists are still chasing. He has created hit records, worked with some of the biggest names in music, and built a reputation as someone who thinks beyond just album sales. This business mindset has become a major part of Rick Ross' identity. He often talks about ownership, investments, and creating long-term success. For him, music is not just about popularity, it is part of a much larger empire. However, the excitement surrounding this album is not only about business or legacy. Fans want emotion. They want storytelling. They want moments that create conversation. That is exactly why the possibility of diss tracks has created so much attention. Whether Ross directly mentions anyone or simply delivers competitive lyrics, listeners will be paying attention to every word. The question now is whether Rick Ross will use this opportunity to settle old scores, make bold statements, or simply remind everyone that he is still one of hip-hop's most powerful voices. As the release date approaches, the pressure continues to build. The world is waiting to hear if this album becomes a celebration of Rick Ross' legacy or the start of another unforgettable chapter in hip-hop history. For years, Rick Ross has been known as an artist who understands the power of attention. He knows that in hip-hop, the music is only one part of the battle. The conversations, the interviews, the moments that create debate, and the reactions from fans can become just as important as the songs themselves. That is exactly why his recent comments about his upcoming album created such a massive reaction. When Ross hinted that the project could include records aimed at certain people in the industry, the entire conversation around the album immediately changed. What was supposed to be a celebration of a veteran artist returning with new music suddenly became a mystery. Fans were no longer only asking how the album would sound. They were asking who might be involved in the lyrical war. The biggest question became simple. Who is Rick Ross talking about? In the world of hip-hop, a single statement can create endless theories. Fans started looking back at Ross' history, his recent interviews, and the relationships that have changed throughout his career. Almost immediately, two names dominated the conversation, Drake and 50 Cent. The reason these names stood out is because both situations represent different chapters of Rick Ross' journey. With Drake, it is a story of a powerful partnership that eventually became complicated. With 50 Cent, it is a rivalry that became one of the most memorable conflicts in rap history. The first major twist is that this album may not simply be about making music. It could be about controlling the narrative. Rick Ross has spent years building a reputation as someone who refuses to be ignored. Throughout his career, he has faced criticism, challenges, and public debates, but he has always found a way to remain part of the conversation. Now, after a long break from releasing a major solo project, he has an opportunity to address everything that has happened during that time. And that is where fans believe the real tension begins. The relationship between Rick Ross and Drake is one of the most interesting stories in recent hip-hop history. At one point, they were viewed as a powerful duo. Their collaborations created major moments, and their connections seemed natural. Both artists represented different styles but managed to create chemistry whenever they worked together. However, the music industry changes quickly. Artists grow, alliances shift, and situations that once seemed permanent can suddenly become complicated. As Drake continued becoming one of the biggest artists in the world, and Ross continued building his own empire, fans began noticing changes. Public conversations became more competitive, and certain comments started creating speculation. Then came the era where every lyric became a possible message. Hip-hop fans are known for analyzing everything. A line in a song, a social media post, or a comment during an interview can become the center of attention. When two major artists have history, people naturally search for hidden meanings. That is why any possible reference between Ross and Drake becomes a major topic. The first twist is that the tension may not even need a direct name drop to create headlines. In today's music culture, listeners often decide for themselves who a song is about. A clever line can start a conversation without an artist ever confirming anything. And Rick Ross understands that power. He has always been skilled at creating moments. His confidence, delivery, and ability to create dramatic imagery have been a major part of his success. If he chooses to send a message through music, he knows exactly how to make people listen. But then there is another name that brings even more history into the situation: 50 Cent. The rivalry between Rick Ross and 50 Cent has been discussed for years because it represents one of the biggest clashes between two personalities in hip-hop. It was not just about music. It became a battle of reputations, confidence, and public image. Their conflict created countless headlines. Both artists used interviews, songs, and public appearances to express their opinions. Fans watched as each side defended their legacy and attempted to control the story surrounding their careers. Even after years passed, the rivalry never completely disappeared. That is why Ross mentioning possible shots on a new album immediately brought 50 Cent back into the discussion. Many fans believe that if Ross truly wants to make a statement, addressing a longtime rival would create one of the biggest moments of his career. A single verse could dominate conversations across social media, podcasts, and hip-hop platforms. But there is another possibility. Maybe Rick Ross does not need to directly respond to anyone. After building a successful career and business empire, Ross may view this album as a chance to show growth rather than revisit old battles. He has reached a point where his legacy speaks for itself. However, competition has always been part of hip-hop culture. For many artists, proving they still have the ability to dominate the conversation is important. A strong response, a memorable line, or a powerful statement can remind audiences why they became successful in the first place. And this is where the pressure begins. Rick Ross is returning at a time when the music industry looks completely different. New artists have taken over charts, streaming has changed how fans consume music, and attention spans have become shorter than ever. A veteran artist cannot simply release an album and expect people to listen. They need a moment. They need something that makes people stop scrolling. And the possibility of a Drake or 50 Cent response creates exactly that. The biggest mystery is whether Ross planned this attention from the beginning or whether the speculation has grown naturally because of his history. Either way, the result is the same. People are talking. Fans are debating. And everyone wants to know what is coming next. The first twist is that this album may not only be about Rick Ross proving he still belongs among hip-hop's elite. It could also be about him rewriting old narratives, answering critics, and showing that after all these years, he still knows how to create a moment. But if the rumors are true, and if certain names really do appear on this project, then the reaction could be massive. Because in hip-hop, one verse can change everything. And Rick Ross may be preparing to deliver the verse everyone has been waiting for. The anticipation around Rick Ross' upcoming album has reached a completely different level. What started as excitement for a veteran rapper returning after years away from solo projects has transformed into a massive conversation about competition, old rivalries, and whether Ross is preparing to answer some of the biggest names who have been connected to him over the years. For decades, hip-hop has been built around one powerful idea: competition. Artists challenge each other, fans debate who is on top, and every major release becomes a chance for someone to make a statement. But when an artist like Rick Ross enters that conversation, people pay attention because his career has always been connected to confidence, luxury, and a willingness to speak boldly. And now, after comments about possible records aimed at certain people, fans are looking deeper into every interview, every preview, and every possible clue surrounding the album. The biggest question everyone wants answered is simple. Is Rick Ross really preparing to address 50 Cent and Drake on this project? Nothing has been officially confirmed, but the speculation has exploded because the history between these artists runs deep. For years, Rick Ross and 50 Cent have been connected through one of hip-hop's most talked about rivalries. Their exchanges created some of the most memorable moments in rap culture, with both artists using interviews, music, and social media to defend their names and challenge each other. The rivalry became bigger than just songs. It became about reputation, success, business, and legacy. Every time either artist made a major move, fans looked back at their history and wondered if another chapter was coming. Now, with Ross preparing a major comeback project, many listeners believe this could be the perfect moment for him to revisit old battles, not necessarily through direct attacks, but through clever lyrics, confidence, and reminders of his own accomplishments. But then another name entered the conversation: Drake. The relationship between Rick Ross and Drake is complicated because it was once viewed as one of the strongest collaborations in modern hip-hop. The two artists created memorable records together and appeared to have genuine chemistry. However, after public disagreements and online moments between them, fans began questioning whether that relationship had changed permanently. This is where the speculation around Ross' new album became even bigger. Listeners started wondering whether certain lyrics could be responses to Drake's recent music or comments. Could Ross be using this album to remind everyone of his position in the game? Could he be sending messages without directly naming anyone? Or could fans simply be reading too much into normal competitive rap lyrics? That uncertainty is exactly what has made the situation so interesting. Because in hip-hop, sometimes the biggest moments happen when nobody knows exactly what is coming. A single line can create thousands of theories. A single interview can start a week-long debate. And one song can completely change the conversation. But the biggest twist is that Rick Ross is not entering this moment as an artist trying to prove he belongs. He already has decades of experience, major collaborations, successful business moves, and a fanbase that has followed him through every era. That changes everything. A younger artist might release a diss track because they need attention. But Ross has a different position. He can choose whether to respond or ignore the noise completely. And that decision could become the most important part of this entire story. Because sometimes the strongest statement is not attacking someone else. Sometimes the strongest statement is showing that you are still standing, still successful, still relevant, still capable of making people talk. However, fans believe there could be another layer to this story. The timing. The album arrives during a moment when hip-hop conversations are heavily focused on legacy. New artists are dominating charts, streaming has changed the business, and older artists are constantly being questioned about their place in the current era. For Ross, this project represents more than just another album. It represents a chance to remind people why his name has survived through multiple generations of hip-hop. And if he decides to include competitive records, the impact could be huge. Not because fans need another feud, but because rap fans love moments that feel historic. They love watching legends defend their position. They love analyzing lyrics. They love debating who had the stronger response. And Rick Ross knows exactly how powerful that attention can be. But there is also another possibility. Maybe the biggest surprise is that the album will not focus on old enemies at all. Maybe Ross is preparing to tell a different story. A story about ownership. A story about business. A story about surviving the ups and downs of an industry that constantly changes. Because throughout his career, Ross has often emphasized building beyond music. His brand has become connected to entrepreneurship, investments, and creating opportunities outside of just recording songs. That perspective could shape this entire project. Instead of looking backward at old conflicts, he could be focused on showing the next stage of his career. But regardless of the direction, one thing is undeniable. People are watching. The rumors, the interviews, and the debates have already created massive attention before the album even arrives. And when the music finally drops, every lyric will be analyzed. Every bar will be questioned. Every possible reference will become a conversation. Because when Rick Ross speaks, especially after years away from a solo album, the hip-hop world listens. And now the biggest mystery remains. Will this album become a celebration of his legacy? Or will it become the next major chapter in some of rap's biggest rivalries? The answer is coming soon. As the conversation around Rick Ross' upcoming album continues to grow, the reaction from fans, artists, and the wider hip-hop community has become almost as interesting as the music itself. Before the album has even arrived, people are already debating what kind of statement Rick Ross is preparing to make. Some fans believe this could be one of the biggest moments of his career, while others are focused on whether the project will include responses to the names that have been connected to him throughout his journey. The biggest reason people are paying so much attention is because Rick Ross is not viewed as just another rapper releasing an album. He represents an entire era. For many hip-hop fans, Ross is connected to a time when larger-than-life personalities, unforgettable collaborations, and intense competition dominated conversations in rap. His voice, his image, and his confidence have made him one of the most recognizable figures in the culture. Now, after years away from releasing a major solo project, fans feel like this comeback carries extra weight. Social media has become the center of the discussion. Across different platforms, fans have been breaking down interviews, analyzing comments, and creating theories about what could appear on the album. Some listeners believe Ross' confidence during recent conversations suggests he has something major planned. Others argue that fans should wait for the actual music before making assumptions. Because in hip-hop, speculation is often just as powerful as reality. A simple comment can become a headline. A single lyric can create weeks of debate. And when an artist with a history of rivalries returns, every word gets examined under a microscope. The possible involvement of 50 Cent has especially brought attention from longtime hip-hop followers. The rivalry between Ross and 50 Cent remains one of the most discussed battles from their generation. Even years later, fans still revisit old interviews, songs, and moments from their back and forth. For some fans, the idea of Ross addressing that history feels like a throwback to classic hip-hop competition. They believe a strong response could remind people of the intensity and personality that made that era memorable. But others have a different opinion. Some listeners believe both artists have already built successful careers beyond their old disagreements. They argue that revisiting past conflicts may not be necessary when both men have created businesses and legacies outside of music. This divide has created a larger conversation about the role of beef in modern hip-hop. Is competition still important? Does a veteran artist need controversy to create excitement? Or does true longevity come from focusing on growth instead of old battles? Those questions have become part of the discussion surrounding Ross' album. Then there is the Drake conversation. Because of their history as collaborators, any mention of Drake naturally creates attention. The two artists have created memorable moments together, and fans remember the chemistry they once had. But after public disagreements and changing relationships, listeners have become curious about whether that chapter is completely finished. Some fans believe competitive lyrics are part of rap culture and should be expected. Others believe artists can move in different directions without every disagreement becoming a major feud. Inside the industry, the reaction has also been focused on one major question. Can Rick Ross create another defining moment? Veteran artists often face a unique challenge. They are not only competing with new artists dominating current trends, but they are also competing with their own history. When someone has already created major records and built a strong legacy, expectations become extremely high. Fans do not just want another album. They want something memorable. They want moments. They want songs that create conversations long after the first listen. And that pressure is exactly what makes this release so interesting. Many people in hip-hop recognize that Ross has always understood the importance of timing. Throughout his career, he has been known for creating attention around his projects, whether through powerful collaborations, confident interviews, or strong branding. That ability to stay in the conversation has helped him remain relevant through multiple changes in the music industry. The reaction from newer hip-hop fans has also been interesting. Some younger listeners who may not have followed every chapter of Ross' career are now discovering the history behind his name. Online discussions have introduced a new generation to his past rivalries, his biggest records, and his influence. This shows how powerful hip-hop history can be. A conversation from years ago can suddenly become relevant again when the right moment arrives. However, there is also a group of fans who are warning others not to focus only on controversy. They believe the music should be the main story. They want to hear production, lyrics, storytelling, and creativity rather than only looking for possible references to other artists. For them, the ultimate test will not be interviews or rumors. The ultimate test will be the songs. Because at the end of the day, hip-hop history is not built only through headlines. It is built through records that people remember. Records that influence culture. Records that stand the test of time. And that is the challenge waiting for Rick Ross. The attention is already there. The curiosity is already there. The debates are already happening. Now the music has to deliver. Whether the album becomes known for competitive moments, personal storytelling, business-focused themes, or a combination of everything, one thing is clear. Rick Ross has created an atmosphere where people are paying attention before the first song even plays. And that level of anticipation is something every artist wants. The entire hip-hop community is watching closely. Fans are waiting. Artists are listening. And when the project finally arrives, every detail will be analyzed to see what message Rick Ross truly wants to send. Because after years of building his name, this album is not just about proving he can still make music. It is about showing exactly where he stands in the current era of hip-hop. As the release of Rick Ross' highly anticipated album gets closer, the biggest question is no longer just about the music. The question is about the message. After all the interviews, all the speculation, and all the conversations surrounding possible shots at 50 Cent, Drake, and other figures connected to his career, fans are now waiting to find out what Rick Ross really decided to put into the record. Because there is one thing everyone knows about hip-hop. The most powerful moments are usually the ones nobody sees coming. For weeks, fans have been trying to predict the direction of this album. Some believe Ross is preparing to remind everyone why he has survived through multiple generations of rap. Others believe he could use this moment to address old situations and finally close certain chapters. But what if the biggest surprise is not who he mentions? What if the biggest surprise is who he chooses not to mention? That possibility has become one of the most interesting parts of the conversation. Because Rick Ross is now at a different stage of his career. He is no longer the artist fighting for recognition. He is no longer trying to convince people that he belongs. He has already built the catalog. He has already created the moments. He has already established himself as one of the most recognizable voices in modern hip-hop. So the question becomes, does he really need to respond? Or is simply releasing a powerful album the ultimate response? That is where the mystery begins. Many fans expected this project to become a battlefield. They expected every interview, every song title, and every lyric preview to contain clues about possible rivalries. But there is another possibility. Maybe Ross understands something that many artists eventually learn. Attention from conflict can disappear quickly. But a great album can last forever. And that could be the real strategy behind this entire rollout. Instead of chasing old battles, Ross may be focused on creating a statement about his own journey. The business moves, the lessons learned, the victories, the setbacks, the evolution. A veteran artist returning after years away has something younger artists cannot copy: perspective. And that perspective could become the strongest part of the album. However, the speculation around possible diss records has already changed the way people will listen. Every line will be examined. Every phrase will be debated. Fans will search for hidden meanings. They will compare lyrics. They will discuss whether certain bars are directed at specific people. That is the power of hip-hop storytelling. Sometimes the audience becomes part of the story because they decide what the lyrics mean. And that is exactly why anticipation around this album continues to grow. But then comes another twist. The people expecting a major confrontation may be surprised by the level of confidence Ross brings without needing to call anyone out. Because sometimes the loudest statement is silence. Sometimes the strongest move is refusing to participate in a conversation that no longer matters. And if Ross delivers a project filled with strong records, powerful messages, and memorable moments, the conversation could completely shift. Suddenly, the focus would no longer be on old rivalries. It would be on the music, on the legacy, on whether Rick Ross just delivered another major chapter in his career. That is the challenge. Because when an artist has been around this long, every new project becomes a test. Can they still create excitement? Can they still connect with fans? Can they still make people care? Based on the attention surrounding this release, one thing is already clear. People care. The debates prove that. The theories prove that. The constant conversations prove that. Whether fans love him, criticize him, or simply want to see what happens next, Rick Ross still has the ability to create a major moment. And now the final question remains. When the album finally arrives, will fans hear a veteran artist looking back at old battles? Or will they hear an artist completely focused on building his next legacy? Will there be hidden messages? Will there be unexpected collaborations? Will there be moments that change the entire conversation? Nobody knows yet. And that uncertainty is exactly what makes this release so exciting. Because in hip-hop, anticipation is part of the experience. The rumors create the energy. The debates create the attention. But the music decides the legacy. So when Rick Ross finally presses play and the first track begins, the entire hip-hop world will be listening closely. Not just looking for names. Not just looking for controversy. But looking for the truth behind the music. Because after everything that has been said, everything that has been rumored, and everything that has been debated, the biggest statement Rick Ross can make may not come from an interview. It may not come from a response. It may not come from a rivalry. It may come from the album itself. And that is the moment everyone is waiting for. So now the biggest question is finally here. Do you think Rick Ross' upcoming album will become one of the biggest moments in hip-hop this year? Will he address the names that fans have been talking about? Or will he ignore the outside noise and focus on creating another classic project? The conversation is already heating up, and everyone has a different opinion. Some fans believe this could be the perfect opportunity for Ross to remind the world why he has remained one of the most respected figures in rap for so many years. Others believe the real victory is not responding to anyone, but proving that his legacy stands strong without needing any extra controversy. Now we want to hear from you. Do you think Rick Ross should include competitive tracks aimed at his longtime rivals? Should he respond to the conversations surrounding 50 Cent and Drake? Or should he let the music speak for itself and focus on the next chapter of his career? Drop your thoughts in the comments below because this debate is just getting started. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure you hit that like button because it helps more hip-hop fans discover this video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more breaking music news, celebrity updates, industry conversations, and deep dives into the biggest stories happening in entertainment. Turn on notifications so you never miss the next update, because with major artists, unexpected moments can happen at any time. The album is coming, The discussions are growing, and the entire hip-hop community is watching closely. Stay tuned, because the next chapter could be the one everyone remembers. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.